So because Phase 4 of the MCU has ended, I thought now would be a fitting time to give you my ranking of all 30 MCU films. Now, by the time you're watching this video, I am aware that Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania has released, but by the time I'm filming this video, I actually have not seen it yet. I actually plan on seeing it tonight by the time I'm filming this. But since that's Phase 5, I wanted to do this ranking before I watch Phase 5 because, you know, I just thought it would be fitting after Phase 4 to rank Phase 1, 2, 3, and 4, all the movies together. And because there's 30 MCU films, I'm not really gonna go too in-depth with this video. I realized that I kind of rambled in my last MCU ranking video, but that was like only 8 movies, and you know, we're talking about 30 films in this video, so I'm not, you know, if I go in depth with a lot of them, then this video is probably going to end up being like an hour long, and I don't really want that. Plus, I'm kind of busy with other things that I'm trying to do right now. So I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of all of my main points on each film, and then we're just going to move on. At number 30, in my opinion, the worst MCU film is Spider-Man: Far From Home. Now, I know this may shock some of you, especially if you're new to my channel, but, you know, if you know me, then you know I'm a pretty big Spider-Man fan, and this spot is more of a personal pick for me. You know, the reason that Far From Home is at the bottom for me is just more of a personal thing, just because of my passion for the Spider-Man character. You know, I'm a huge Spider-Man fan, and for me, Far From Home just really gets the character so wrong, and it's just not a good Spider-Man movie. Its portrayal of Spider-Man and the characters are just so awful. You know, I can't stand the portrayals of the characters in this movie. It's really annoying. Not only is it bad, it's just really annoying, the portrayal of the characters. If you want more in-depth thoughts about this film and why I hate it, then go watch my Spider-Man movie ranking video that I did like 2 years ago, because, you know, I go more in-depth with those movies, so, you know, you'll get my thoughts on Far From Home and Homecoming. At number 29 is Thor: The Dark World. Now, you know, you can argue that Far From Home is better, but again, like, Far From Home is more of a personal pick for me on why it's my least favorite MCU film. You know, if you think that Thor: The Dark World is the worst MCU film and you think it's far worse than Far From Home, I wouldn't blame you. But again, it's more of a personal pick, and honestly, I understand people who don't like Thor: The Dark World, because I don't like it either. You know, everybody has said everything about this movie at this point. You know, this movie's starting to get pretty old now, 2013, so, you know, everybody has said everything, so I'm gonna go really quick on this one, but all I'm gonna say is it's extremely boring, it's bland, it's forgettable. You know, who really cares about the Dark Elf shit? You know, it's just such a forgettable movie. The only good thing is Loki. And, you know, I think this Family Guy clip sums up Thor: The Dark World pretty well.
Oh my god, who the hell cares?
At number 28 is the first Thor film. Yeah, Thor is just a little bit better than Thor: The Dark World, just because it's more entertaining. You know, it's still a very bland superhero film. Like, it's not really anything special, but, you know, it's just more entertaining. It has similar problems with the second film, but again, it's just the entertainment factor is what makes it a little better. At number 27 is one of the more recent MCU films, and that is Eternals. Yeah, and I don't think anyone's blaming me for putting this so low on the list. I mean, a lot of people are agreeing with each other in saying that Eternals just sucks. It is so unbelievably forgettable. You know, I've only watched this once, but like, I can barely remember any of the characters' names. You know, it's so freaking forgettable. You know, at least with Thor: The Dark World, you know, it's a forgettable film, but at least with so many people who have talked about it, it is more memorable than Eternals, because like Eternals, it's like nobody even cares about Eternals. I hear no one talk about this film, and that's what makes it so even more forgettable than Thor: The Dark World. It's like, no one cares about this film. It's so forgettable. At number 26 is Iron Man 2. Now, I originally had this lower on the list, but I decided to move it up a bit because, thinking back on it, there are a lot of really good things about Iron Man 2. It's got some really cool action scenes, especially, that one with Black Widow in the hallway. That's like, it's probably become iconic at this point. It's really fun. And there's some really fun scenes, which is why I raised it on the list. But overall, it's just like Iron Man 2 is basically like the problems with a lot of like the older 2000s superhero films. It just starts to cram way too much stuff into the plot and the story, and there's just like way too many things going on. You got Tony dealing with the main villain, and then you got, a side villain, and then you got him dealing with the fact that he's apparently dying, and then he, cures himself, and then you add Black Widow in there, and then you have Rhodey with his stuff that he's doing with War Machine. It's just a bunch of craziness. At number 25 is Captain Marvel. Now, a lot of people don't like Captain Marvel, and I completely agree. The problem with this film is the main character, Carol Danvers. She's just such an uninteresting character. Like, she might honestly be my least favorite. I don't want to say least favorite MCU character, because there's probably worse, like, side characters. But I think out of, like, the main hero characters, like, who have, like, powers and who, like, fight, Carol Danvers might be my least favorite MCU character. And that is counting all the Eternals, because at least, like, with the Eternals, they don't, like, actively piss me off like Carol Danvers does. Like, Carol Danvers' character, like, actually pisses me off just because, like, she's an uninteresting character. There's nothing about her that is likable. She just has a very bland personality, and she just kind of, like, she just never stands out. I especially hated her in Endgame with how arrogant she was with everything. And it's so, like, it's her character is annoying, uninteresting, and that's the problem I have with Captain Marvel, like, her movie. There's other reasons too, like the fucking shit with Nick Fury, how he gets his eye scratched by a cat, and that's why he has the eye patch. It's like, really? Like, how long have we waited to find out what happened to his eye, and this is what you give us? It's like, go fuck yourself. At number 24 is Black Widow, another Phase 4 movie. Black Widow is just, it has some good moments. Again, this is, like, similar to, like, Iron Man 2, where it's like, I want to put it lower on the list, but I kind of can't, because, like, it does have some really good scenes and some really good, character moments. But overall, the movie is just kind of, it kind of feels pointless. You have a Black Widow movie releasing after Natasha dies in Endgame, and it kind of feels like, okay, like, this movie should have come out way before Endgame, or at least like a year or two before Endgame. I think honestly what they should have done is just, instead of releasing Captain Marvel right before Endgame, they should have just released Black Widow just before Endgame, and then just cut out the post-credit scene, which, spoils her death. It should have went Black Widow, Avengers Endgame, and then Spider-Man Far From Home, and then just, like, release Captain Marvel later on in 2019. Like, that would have made so much more sense. Like, I get that they're trying to set up the Captain Marvel character so that, like, fans can get familiar with her, so that she can, be liked in Endgame, even though I fucking hated her character. But, that's what they were trying to do, and I understand that, but I felt like to have Black Widow's death mean more, they should have released Black Widow before Endgame, and then just released Captain Marvel as a prequel after Endgame. You know, I think, and not that I don't think Black Widow's death had as much of an impact since Black Widow was released after. I still really liked Natasha's death in Endgame. I thought it was handled really well, and you know, it certainly like gets you, like, you know, it's done really well. But I felt it would have been more impactful if Black Widow was released before Endgame. I know I kind of went off on a rant. I know I said I wasn't going to go in depth, but I can't help myself sometimes. I have to explain my reasoning with this. But yeah, Black Widow, it's got some good moments, but overall, it's just pretty bland. At number 23 is Ant-Man and the Wasp. This movie's problem is just that it really doesn't make sense at times. Ant-Man and the Wasp just kind of feels like a nothing movie. It feels like you can just skip it and you wouldn't miss any important things. You know, the only thing that you really need to know about these movies, well, there's two things actually, but, you know, you need to know that they rescue Janet from the quantum realm, and then they get dusted in the post-credit scene. That's really all you need to know. You can skip the rest of the movie. It's kind of useless. At number 22 is Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, this is a movie that I liked when it first came out, but then over the years, as I became more familiar with Spider-Man as a character and more like invested in his character from the comics, the more I started to really hate Spider-Man Homecoming. It's pretty much the same reasons as Far From Home, but I just think that Homecoming is a little better from Far From Home. And honestly, it's solely because the performances are fucking great in this movie. The performances are what carry this movie to the number 22 spot. You know, especially that of Michael Keaton. You know, he's extremely intimidating in this movie. And, you know, I've mentioned before, but that scene where they're driving to Homecoming and, you know, they're in the car and you know, Liz's dad is driving Peter and Liz to Homecoming. It's very well done. The performances, you know, the intimidation in that scene, like you know what I'm trying to say? Like, it's just so incredibly nerve-wracking, that scene, like, especially when I was watching it in theaters. Like, I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, holy shit, like, this is amazing. But, you know, the rest of the film is just shit. It just doesn't understand the character of Spider-Man. It treats him like Iron Man Jr. and not like Spider-Man. At number 21 is one of the oldest MCU movies, The Incredible Hulk. This was the first MCU movie that I saw in theaters, I honestly don't really understand. Well, I mean, no, I should say that. I understand the hate that people have for this movie, but I honestly think it's a little bit underrated. Again, it's not like great, which is why it's only at number 21, but I can't help but enjoy it whenever I watch it. You know, it's got some really good scenes, actually. I think it deserves a little bit more praise than it gets. While I still understand the criticism, I just think that there's a lot of scenes that need to be looked at and appreciated more, because I think that there's, you know, some really great moments in the Incredible Hulk. I think even though, you know, the CGI is fucking terrible on Hulk and Abomination, you know, but aside from that, I think the final fight in Harlem was really freaking amazing. It was incredibly entertaining. And that final fight is also like really violent. It gets pretty violent. And you know, this was before Disney owned Marvel, so they could do that. But yeah, that's what the MCU needs more. They need more violent scenes. At number 20 is the first Ant-Man movie. Now, I think this is kind of like probably one of the most average MCU movies. It's not really forgettable like Eternals or the Thor movies, but like, it's just so average. Like, it's your typical kind of superhero film. You know, it's got some really cool action scenes, but that's really it. I mean, it's got some good character moments, you know, with Hank Pym explaining to his daughter how her mom died, and you know, that scene is really great. And you know, Evangeline Lilly's performance in that scene is great, but other than that, the movie's just very bland. It's extremely average. At number 19 is Thor: Love and Thunder. I just talked about this like a couple weeks ago, so I'm not really gonna go into it, but I agree. It's painfully unfunny, and it pales in comparison to Thor: Ragnarok. It's a pretty shit film, but I don't think it's like one of the worst MCU movies. I think it's definitely way more entertaining than a lot of other MCU movies, the ones I've discussed before, but I agree with the criticisms. I just, it's entertaining enough for me to put it at the number 19 spot. At number 18 is Avengers: Age of Ultron. This movie has some really great moments. I thought it was kind of boring at parts. Like, it's got some, again, like, the whole movie isn't boring, but for an Avengers movie, you think it'd be way more entertaining than it is. I think the problem with Avengers: Age of Ultron is it just does everything that the first film did, but just does it again, but just not as good. It just tries to be just a fun, summer movie, but like, that's really it. It doesn't really do anything beyond that. For a sequel, you kind of want a sequel to build upon the first film and introduce new things, but it doesn't really do that. All it does is, introduce a few new characters and, a few fan servicey moments, but that's it. It's just another giant superhero fight. Number 17 is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Now, I know I'm going to get some hate for putting this so low on the list, but honestly, I think Shang-Chi is a little bit overrated. I don't understand, like, the love that people have for this movie. Like, people are, like, praising. I constantly hear people saying how great Shang-Chi was. Like, I don't think it's a bad film at all. It's just that I just don't see what was so great about it. I think that the character that Awkwafina plays, I think her name is Katie, is probably the most annoying side character in the MCU history. The most annoying comic relief character. I didn't think she was funny at all. She's just one of those comic relief characters that just gets on your nerves and that you want to punch in the face so hard. So, and I don't blame Awkwafina, but her character is just so freaking annoying. But other than that, I do think it has really good action sequences. I agree with what other people are saying, and like, the action sequences are really great, especially that final battle with the fucking dragon and everything. It's phenomenal. The final battle is probably one of the best final battles out of the solo MCU movies that are, focused on one character. At number 16 is the first Doctor Strange movie. I think mostly it's due to the entertainment factor. The action sequences are very unique. It's really, really kind of beautiful to look at the action sequences and, the special effects that they did. So I think that's kind of the reason why Doctor Strange is higher than most. It's mainly due to, the entertainment factor, the action sequences. I think, like, the story is kind of bland, typical superhero movie stuff. But other than that, yeah, it's very entertaining. It's got some of the worst comedy moments in the entire MCU. I mean, the comedy in Doctor Strange is just freaking awful. At number 15 is Iron Man. I know, again, I might get some hate for this, for putting, the first MCU movie, the movie that started it all, only at number 15, but, I personally have never really thought that Iron Man was, like, that great, as great as people say. I appreciate it for what it is. It started this huge, massively popular universe, and I'm grateful for that, but as far as just, like, the movie goes, I think that the first act and maybe, like, half of the second act is really boring, actually. I always thought it was just really boring. Even even as like when I got older. As a kid I thought it was boring, and even when I got older I think it's a little bit slow. It's very slowly paced. The where he's in the cave and he's being held, and then he creates his first suit. You know, I understand what it means for the character of Tony Stark, and I get why it's there. It's just that personally I've never found it to be very entertaining. But that's only like the first act and maybe like parts of the second act. After that, the movie like picks up a little bit for me, but overall, the reason why I'm putting it this high is just for basically for just how it means, the the start of the MCU, the character of Tony Stark. But other than that, if this was just basically if this list was basically just for pure entertainment, then Iron Man would be a lot lower on the list. At number 14 is Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, again, I'm going to be very quick with this one because, I have actually quite a few things to say, but I still plan on making an updated review of this film at some point down the line. I don't know when, but, I'll say, so, I'll save my thoughts for that video, but all I'll say is, my opinion has definitely changed since my first review and my first viewing. Every time I watch the movie, it slowly just gets worse and worse, and I'll explain why in the review. But yeah, it's still the best Tom Holland Spider-Man movie, and it has some really great moments, and that's all I'll say for now. And it's number 14. At number 13 is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Yes, I liked this more than No Way Home, and it's mainly because again, No Way Home is like more of a personal thing for me. It's because of how passionate I am for the character of Spider-Man. It's very important to me that they get the character right. But with Doctor Strange 2, I mainly like it more because it's not so much a personal connection, and it's also because Doctor Strange 2, I understand the criticisms that everyone has, and I agree with some of those criticisms, but I think Doctor Strange 2 needs to be appreciated more for what it did with the MCU. It got violent at times. It's probably the most violent MCU movie, and that surprised me a lot, and it's something that I really like and appreciate about the movie, is how dark it got at times. But yeah, other than that, I have nothing else to say. I literally just talked about this in the last ranking video, so I'm going to move on. At number 12 is the best Thor movie, which is Thor Ragnarok. I think the whole goal they were trying to do with this movie is to just entertain you and make you laugh. Just make you have a good experience while watching it. Just have fun. Thor Ragnarok is one of the more funny MCU movies, and it's not all the jokes land. I think a lot of the jokes are still pretty freaking annoying and just can be cut out. But there's a lot of jokes that I actually, looking back on now, I still think are actually pretty funny. And, that's surprising for me to say because usually I fucking hate the MCU comedy. I think it's the most immature garbage that's being put out these days. But for Thor Ragnarok, I think there's a lot of jokes that work, and overall the movie's just really fun, and there's some really great moments. At number 11 is a pick that a lot of people are going to be surprised by, but it's Captain America: The First Avenger. Now, I know a lot of people tend to forget about this movie. They kind of think it's Captain America's origin. It's not really that great. But I can't help but really love this movie every time I watch it. I think it's extreme. It's probably one of the most underrated MCU movies in my opinion. I think that the way Captain America's origin is told is really interesting. I like, the setting of World War II, and it's just a really interesting film. I think it's actually a very unique superhero film. Not like with the, obviously by the end it gets a little like samey feeling, but I think in general the movie overall is a little bit unique because of the setting and at the time in 2011, we hadn't had a lot of superhero movies that take place during World War II. Is it like the best movie that portrays World War II? Absolutely not. But for a superhero movie, I think that the way it portrays everything with World War II is actually done really well. So now we're getting into the top 10, and this is where, to the point where, like, I actually do think that these movies are really good for the most part. At number 10 is Iron Man 3. Yes, I like Iron Man 3 more than the first Iron Man, and I know I'm going to get shit for that, but, you know, this movie is very divided with you know, just fans in general and comic book fans. Comic book fans fucking hate this movie because of the twist with the Mandarin near the end, of how he's just an actor playing the Mandarin. So that kind of pissed a lot of comic fans off. And, like, I don't want to sound like a hypocrite here, you know, me complaining about how, oh, Homecoming and Far From Home don't portray Spider-Man correctly, but I like this movie that is not accurate to the comics. Well, I mean, yeah, like, you could say that's a bit hypocritical of me to say, but I'm not really a fan of comic book Iron Man, so, you know, I went into this film as a non-comic fan, you know, I'm just judging the film as a film and not how it adapts comic books, you know. So in that regard, I think Iron Man 3 is a really good movie. The way it, like, Tony Stark's character in the movie is really great. You know, him dealing with PTSD after the events of the first Avengers film, and how that plays into his life, and, you know, him having panic attacks. It's really done really well. And one thing I appreciate about this movie that's, like, different from most MCU movies is that it's not just a fucking joke fest that is completely silly and doesn't take itself seriously. Iron Man 3 is one of those MCU movies that actually takes the story seriously and isn't just like a joke fest. Like, you know, there are jokes in it, but that's because, like, the character of Tony Stark doesn't really take what he does seriously, and so, you know, that's part of his character. And so there are jokes scattered throughout the movie, but they're not overbearing like they are on most MCU films, especially the ones we're getting nowadays. Like, it's not, like, distracting and annoying as fuck. It actually does, you know, make sense for the characters, and you're gonna notice when we get later down the list, you know, I'm more of a fan of the movies that takes themselves seriously. At number 9 is Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Again, I've talked about this movie a lot by this point, so I'm going to be very brief, but it's a really great movie. It's very well written, you know, very emotional, you know, the performances are outstanding. A great villain, may not be as great as Killmonger, but still, great villain. And yeah, it's just a really well done movie. At number 8 is Avengers Endgame. Now I could really, like, if I wanted to, I could really go in depth with this movie because there's a lot I can say about it. I think the movie is personally a little overrated. You know, even having it at number 8, I still think it's really overrated. People act like Avengers Endgame is like this perfect movie, you know, and I think, like, you know, obviously it's a really significant movie. You know, it's trying to tie together like 20 some films at that point, so, like, it's very unique in being a superhero movie because it's trying to tie together all of these plots and all of these threads that have been built up for, like, over 10 years. It has a, like, you know, ginormous set of characters, and it has some of the best moments in any MCU movie. But with that being said, I still have a lot of problems with it, and I don't even consider it near close to the best superhero movie ever made. Not even close to the, you know, it's only number 8 on the MCU ranked movies, so, for me, so obviously I don't even think it's one of the best MCU movies. I have a lot of problems with it, mainly with Thor and Hulk. I think what they did with those two characters was just awful, especially with Thor. But overall, you know, the movie's great. It's very entertaining. It's 3 hours, and each hour of the movie is dedicated to a specific thing. Like, the first hour is them dealing with the aftermath of Infinity War, and, you know, it's this very, like, depressing feeling. You know, the characters are dealing with loss and everything like that, even though, again, fucking what they did with Thor was awful, and it completely ruined the tone. But then you have the second hour, which is basically just like a time travel adventure where they go back into the past, and try to get all the Infinity Stones. And then you have the last hour, which is this completely just balls to the wall slugfest. You know, so many characters come together and fight Thanos and his army in it's this like ginormous battle of freaking superhero battles, you know, and it's great. But yeah, I think Endgame overall, tiny bit overrated, actually a lot overrated, but overall, you know, it's pretty good. At number 7 is Black Panther. Now, if you've seen my original review of this film that I made back in like 2018 when the film came out, if you've seen my review, you know that I actually didn't really like it all that much when I first saw it. And, you know, I still think that, like, some of my points still hold up. But overall, looking back on that video, you know, all I really did was complain that I thought the movie was kind of boring. But over the years, as I watched this film, like, it actually did get better with each viewing. And, you know, I kind of more understood what the film was trying to be about. It has one of the best villains, arguably probably the best villain in the entire MCU, with Eric Killmonger. I think, you know, his character is just so fucking good. And, you know, you understand what he's trying to do and why he's trying to do it. And I'm not just saying this just because of real world circumstances. I'm not like just putting this high for the sake of, you know, that. I honestly do think that this film has gotten better for me as years have passed. At number 6 is Captain America: Civil War. Now, Civil War is one of the most entertaining MCU movies. Obviously, there's been quite a few people who have criticized some of the points in this movie, and, you know, while, you know, some of that is understandable, I think that overall, in general, it's just a really fun movie. But it also gets very dark at points, especially near the end, where you find out, you know, that where Tony finds out that Bucky killed his parents. And then, like, that fight they have afterwards is one of the most brutal MCU fights in the out of the entire franchise. Like, the Captain America versus Iron Man fight is so freaking brutal. And, you know, I love it. I love it that it got brutal. Again, you know, as I've said before, I want the MCU to be more violent, to be more brutal, to be more adult, and less of just this, like, extremely immature joke fest. One of the biggest problems I have with this film is, of course, Spider-Man. I don't like the way he's portrayed. He does nothing. His main problem in this movie is that all he does is just listen to Tony Stark. He never once thinks for himself in this movie. And yeah, I know only he's only in 2 scenes in the movie where Tony Stark discovers him and where he fights at the airport. But in just those 2 scenes, he never once thinks for himself. You know, aside from that one line where he explains why he's Spider-Man. At the airport, all he does is like, oh, listen to Tony Stark. Tony said this. Tony told me to do this. It's just so fucking annoying. At number 5 is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This is one of the best things about this film, and why I like it is, again, it's a movie that, it's an MCU movie that for once takes itself seriously. You know, it's a very dramatic story, like Hydra taking over S.H.I.E.L.D., you know, and that whole, like, secret organization that you don't know about. The stuff with the Winter Soldier is great. It's very dramatic. I actually haven't watched the Winter Soldier in a very long time, but, you know, I still really like it. I think that Civil War is more entertaining than Winter Soldier, but I think Winter Soldier is just like a better movie in general. At number 4 is Avengers: Infinity War. Now, you know, when I first saw this movie, I probably honestly would have put it at number 1, but, you know, as years have passed, it's kind of gotten a little tiny bit worse for me. Again, especially with the dumb-ass humor in this movie. I mean, God, Jesus. The humor in this movie is so overbearing and annoying. And it's just like, shut the fuck up. Like, the characters are constantly spewing out jokes in times when it's incredibly inappropriate. You know, they're dealing with basically, you know, some very serious repercussions, like, you know, Thanos is possibly going to wipe out, you know, half of Earth. And they're, like, a lot of the characters aren't even taking it seriously, and that's, like, the main problem with this movie. But overall, the thing that makes Infinity War so great as a movie is that, like, you have all of these characters that are all trying to go after the same goal of preventing Thanos from getting all the Infinity Stones. And you have, like, a whole, like, shit ton of characters that are all working towards the same goal, but doing it in different ways and in different locations. You know, some of the Avengers are fighting in Wakanda, some of them are on Titan. That's the unique and very interesting part about this film is it's just it's actually very simple in its story. It's just, you know, you need to stop this bad guy from wiping out half of Earth, you know, and getting the weapons in order to do that. And that's what makes it so interesting. Again, I'll say it again, but the way Spider-Man is portrayed in this movie is fucking awful. You know, he's just such a whiny kind of kid in this movie. He acts like a kid, and where Spider-Man in reality would be more thinking about other people, you know. His death scene is especially bad because all he's doing is like, oh, I don't want to go, you know, and he's just scared to die. But it's like, in reality, Spider-Man would be thinking about all of the people, all of his loved ones that he's failed because he failed to stop Thanos. That's what would really be happening, and that what should have been happening. But no, instead, like, they just portray him as this, like, little kid kind of, you know, I don't know what to do kind of thing. At number 3 is the first Avengers film, and really the reason why I like this just a little bit over Infinity War is because, you know, it's not annoying in its humor, and it's not like, it doesn't have these, like, obvious problems. The reason why the first Avengers is so great is because it's just a fun superhero film. That's what makes it so great. It's just such a simple film, you know. It's just about these team of superheroes who are trying to stop an alien invasion. That's it, you know. And Loki as the villain is fucking awesome. It's so great, and the film is just so fun. And it's honestly, it may not be my favorite superhero film, but it is one of the best theater experiences I've ever had. I was about 9 years old when I saw the first Avengers in theaters, and it was one of the best experiences I've ever had in a theater. It was just so fun. The entire audience was loving it. But unfortunately, you know, because the first Avengers did so well in how it did things, you know, it was funny, it was silly, but for the first Avengers film, that was great. But the problem is that they keep on trying to replicate that, and that's the problem. Like, you know, I don't want, like, it's constantly trying to do the same. The MCU is trying to do the same thing that the first Avengers did, just because it was so successful, and it made so much money. I want Marvel to do different things, to branch out. That's one of the reasons why I like Doctor Strange 2 more than most people. You know, it did kind of a horror feel to it. It was violent, but still, the MCU feels it's still latching on to that first Avengers film, because, like, it thinks that, like, that's what people want. The problem is, it's like, we want different things. We want the MCU to branch out and do different genres, different, like, styles, different tones, but unfortunately they just keep on doing the same shit over and over again. At number 2 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I know a lot of people actually don't like this film, but personally I just don't understand it. It's incredibly underrated. Guardians 2 is trying to be about family and friends, and it's so great. It's so emotional in how it portrays that. It gets very emotional, especially towards the end. You know, it has probably one of the saddest MCU endings, but also one of the most heartwarming endings. out of the entire series. It's also probably the most beautiful looking MCU film. You know, people have said it before, but the shots in this movie are so amazing. I will never understand why so many people hate on this film. I think it deserves way more praise and appreciation. But number one, my favorite MCU movie is Guardians of the Galaxy. And it's mainly just because, like, it's basically like the first Avengers film, but just a little bit better. It has better characters, I would argue. It's basically just like the first Avengers film, but just improved upon a little bit. And I know that, like, I was just complaining about, like, how I want things to be different, but, like, with the first Guardians film, number one, it was only, like, 2 years after the first Avengers film, so, you know, that was still somewhat acceptable. But number two, it's really, the characters are what carry the film. You know, the villain, I know a lot of people complain about Ronan, the villain. Ronan's not really a great villain, but the characters, the Guardians, are what carry this film. It also contains my favorite joke in the entire MCU at the very beginning, where, you know, they get all serious and it zooms in and of Peter saying Star-Lord, and then the guy says, "Who?" Like, it's so funny. It's such a simple joke, but I don't know, it just makes me laugh every single time. But yeah, the first two Guardians films are by far my favorite MCU films, just because they're just so entertaining. They're so fun. The characters are great. So that was my ranking of the MCU films so far up to Phase 4. I know I said I wouldn't go in depth, but I guess I kind of did for a lot of them. And I didn't mean to do that, but, you know, sometimes, again, I can't help myself sometimes. In a couple weeks, I'll probably have my review of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And then after that, I'll probably do an MCU ranking of all of the MCU shows, like not only the Disney Plus ones, but the Netflix ones, the ABC shows, the Hulu shit, you know. I'll have my ranking of all those shows. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good night.